Hello, my name is Jon Tait and thanks for checking out my video blog on questioning in the classroom. In this short video blog I'm going to give you some tips and strategies for you to take into the classroom to hopefully improve your questioning and the overall progress of your students. Right, let's get into it then. First thing I want you to look at is taking control of the questioning and the answering of the questions in your classroom. One thing I'd like you to look at is a no hands up approach, so that actually you are making sure you're in control of who's answering the questions. It's far too easy if you employ a strategy of kids putting their hands up in the air for students to put their hands down and not take part in it, and all you do is you actually ask the kids who've got their hands up in the air. What I'd like you to do is to really flip that on its head and start to hot seat students. So actually you are choosing which students are going to answer the question, so all the students in the classroom at all times think, I could be asked the next question. So they've got to be constantly thinking all the time. It also lets you actually pick which students you want to, and you might start to ask students of a lower ability to start with, so then you can bounce the question around afterwards to higher ability students to maybe add to the answer. But all the time you're in charge of that. You are making sure that all the students are taking part, nobody's hiding, and everyone is participating throughout the lesson. Alright, secondly is wait time, and this is something that statistically we do very, very poorly as teachers. And the average wait time that we give when we ask a question in our classrooms is less than 1 second. And when you think about that, that's absolutely crazy. If we're wanting some high-level responses from our students, and we want our students to think deeply about the questions we're asking, giving them less than a second to think about it is just ridiculous. And unfortunately what happens is we revert back to type. When we ask a question, we obviously want an answer, and the first hand that comes up, we generally say, yeah, okay, and then a student then says the first thing that's in their head. That can't be good for learning, and it can't be good if we want a really detailed response. So what we need to do is start to think about actually giving students 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds of wait time, and even that in itself isn't a lot of time. But what it does, it enables students to think deeply, think hard, and we then get better responses, we get more responses, we get responses that are more well constructed, and usually have higher order thinking skills that have been used for the students to actually answer. So I think that's good for everyone. And when you start to employ the wait time along with the no hands up approach, you can really then start to take control and make the students really think very, very deeply about the questions you're asking. Alright, next is a strategy that I've employed significantly over the last few years, and it's a strategy that I picked up from a PE colleague on Twitter, which is the ABC of questioning. Add, build and challenge. And what you do is, once you've posed the question, once you've given the wait time, what you then do is you then bounce it over to someone, and you literally kind of say, well, what's the answer? Somebody gives you an answer, and then you might want to say, who wants to add to this? Who would like to build on this answer? Or maybe who wants to challenge it? And suddenly you then start to construct fantastic answers from around the room, because you're not just taking the first answer that you've been given. You're actually stretching and challenging students, and you have higher expectations. And then all the time you're using the kind of the pause, bounce and pounce method by pausing it, giving the wait time, asking someone for an answer, who wants to add and build on it, so you're then starting to bounce it around. And suddenly you're then starting to construct, hopefully, A and A-star answers in your classroom, rather than just the first answer that you've been given. Next, another strategy that is fantastic that I've used extensively, which really builds students' confidence when answering questions, is think, pair, share. What you do is you pair students up, you pose the question, you give them the wait time, and then you ask them to literally pair up and think and talk about the answer before they share it back to the class. And what this does, it lets the two students think about it, discuss their answers, collaborate on an answer, and come up with a really, really good answer. And then they're able to share that back. And the key ingredient here for this to be successful, and the real magic of this strategy, is that they're able to literally talk out loud and talk about their answer together and get one that they actually feel confident with. So when they actually then share it back to the class, they know that at least someone else agrees with them, or hopefully agrees with them in their pair. And I think a lot of times what happens is when we ask a question and we ask someone to answer it in front of the whole class, that student is cautious because they don't know if they've got the right answer, and they also don't know if anybody else agrees with them in the room. And that can be quite daunting to a student, and that's why we get far too many people saying, I don't know. Because actually they probably do know, or they think they might know, and they've got an answer, but they're just unwilling to share it with the class because they haven't said it out loud and they don't know what the response is going to be. When you start to pair people up and they actually talk to each other and somebody else agrees with them, they're far more likely and far more confident to share that back to the group, because they know, well, yeah, I know someone agrees with me, therefore my answer is probably right. The other thing I want you to think about is deep thinking, and how many opportunities are you giving your students to think deeply in your classroom? How many times are they actually really thinking hard and you're really stretching them? And that comes back to one thing I'd like you to think about when you go back into your classrooms over the next few days and weeks is, are you actually planning for your questioning? Now, as teachers, we, on average, the research suggests we ask over 400 questions a day. That's a phenomenal amount of questions. And it shows that we're constantly dynamically assessing our students all the time and assessing the progress. But if we know that questioning is a key skill and it's a key driver for a stretch and challenge and pace and assessment and all those things, and we're asking up to 400 a day, if we're not planning any of these questions, then we're actually limiting our effectiveness as a teacher. So I think it's really important that you start to think about, what are the key questions that I'm going to use in my classroom or in my lesson tomorrow? What's the timing of the questions? When do I want to pose these questions? How do I want to pose them? What's the strategies that I'm going to use? And it may be that you have some key questions or big questions that are linked not only to your lessons, but to your schemes of learning as well. I think if we start to think about that and actually go back to the drawing board about our questions, then hopefully we're going to be far more effective as teachers, and we're really going to be able to push our students more, make them think far more deeply, and actually make them demonstrate far more progress in the time that we have with them. So hopefully that's given you some tips to take back to your classroom, and to really think about how we question our students and how we can use that key tool to make our students think far more deeply and to demonstrate their progress far more easily in our lessons.